My son sat across the table at Sunday lunch, opened a leather portfolio, and told me his wedding was going to cost $320,000, not his fiancée. My son, his fiancée Brenda Navarro, sat right next to him, quiet, smiling, letting him do all the talking. And that right there, before a single number even registered, was the thing that made my stomach drop. My name is Clifford Larson. I'm 64 years old. I spent 25 years as a federal judge in Houston, Texas, presiding over financial crimes, fraud cases, wire transfer schemes, the whole range of ways people find to take what doesn't belong to them. I've had defendants look me in the eye and lie with a steadiness that would impress a poker champion. After enough years on that bench, you stop being surprised by what people are capable of. You just start noticing things faster. I retired 3 years ago. My doctor said the stress was going to do more damage than the bad knees already were. And for once I listened. I took up restoring old legal texts, did some consulting work when it interested me, and mostly stayed close to home. I live alone. Nathan's mother, Carol, passed 6 years ago from a stroke. It was fast, which the doctor said was a mercy, but fast doesn't make the quiet any easier to live with. When Nathan told me he'd gotten engaged, I was genuinely glad. He'd been careful about relationships his whole life, maybe too careful, and I'd started to wonder if he'd just decided it wasn't worth the effort. He's 35, a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm, steady and responsible, the kind of man who reads the fine print before he signs anything, or so I thought. He introduced me to Brenda about 10 months before that Sunday lunch. She was polished, well-spoken, and immediately interested in things that had nothing to do with her, like my career, the cases I'd worked, the kind of money a federal judge might accumulate over 25 years. I noticed that. I didn't say anything because Nathan was happy, and I didn't want to be the father who ruins things by asking the wrong questions too early. I should have asked them sooner. The Sunday before the lunch, my niece Dana sent me a text. Dana is 38, works in corporate finance, and has known Nathan since they were kids running around my backyard. She doesn't rattle easily, the message said. Uncle Cliff, something is wrong with Nathan. I don't know exactly what, but please pay attention at lunch tomorrow. I'm scared for him. I didn't text back. I just started paying attention a little earlier than planned. When I walked into the restaurant, a nice Italian place Nathan had chosen downtown, they were already seated. Brenda's mother, Loretta Navarro, was at the table too. Nobody had mentioned Loretta was coming. She was a woman in her late 50s, friendly in that deliberate way that's more performance than warmth, with the same careful eyes as her daughter. Nathan stood up when he saw me and shook my hand. He'd lost weight. Not a dramatic amount, but enough that I noticed. His eyes had that particular tired look that comes from months of not sleeping well. Not from one bad night. He smiled too wide and held it too long. We ordered. The conversation stayed light for a while. Then Nathan reached into the bag beside his chair and pulled out the portfolio. It was a proper leather binder, the kind you'd bring to a business meeting. He set it on the table and slid it toward me. Dad? We've been working with a wedding coordinator, he said, and we have the full budget ready. We wanted to go through it with you today. Brenda folded her hands in her lap. She didn't say a word. She just watched me, that smile sitting on her face like it had been placed there. I opened the folder, 30 pages of itemized costs. Venue, catering, floral, photography, transportation, a honeymoon package, miscellaneous fees. Every line had a number beside it. The total at the bottom was $320,000. I turned the pages slowly. I didn't react to the number because I've spent enough years in a courtroom to know that your reaction is the first thing the other side is looking for. This is quite a plan, I said. We've put a lot of work into it, Nathan said. He glanced at Brenda. She gave him a small nod, the kind a coach gives a player from the sideline. Who put this together, I asked. Our coordinator, Patrice Delgado. She handles high-end events all over Houston. Very experienced. And where is her office? The design district. She's booked out months in advance. I nodded and went back to the pages. Loretta started talking then about how Brenda was her only daughter, how a wedding like this only happens once, how family means showing up when it counts. It was a smooth delivery. She'd clearly given it before. I let her talk. What I was actually doing was watching Nathan. He wasn't eating. His hands were flat on the table. Every time Brenda shifted in her seat, his eyes went to her first before they came back to the conversation. When I turned a page in the portfolio, he watched my face the way a man watches a jury return to the room. He wasn't presenting this plan. He was surviving it. I closed the portfolio and set it aside. This is a lot to take in over lunch, I said. Walk me through how this works. If I agree to fund this, what's the process? Brenda spoke for the first time since I'd sat down. Her voice was warm and unhurried, the kind of voice that's been practiced. Patrice works with a network of vendors she's built relationships with over years, she said. The way luxury events work, you don't start with contracts. You start with deposits to hold the dates and the services. The formal paperwork follows once everything is confirmed. So the $320,000 would go out as deposits first. A significant portion, yes, to secure the vendors before someone else books them, to accounts Patrice controls, to the vendors directly through her coordination. I nodded like that made sense. It didn't, but I wasn't going to say that at a restaurant table with breadsticks between us. Loretta jumped back in. She said something about how in their experience, the best vendors didn't wait around, and that hesitation was how you ended up with second-tier everything. She made it sound like asking questions was a form of sabotage. I looked at Nathan. What do you think about all this? He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, I think Brenda deserves the wedding she's always wanted. That wasn't an answer to my question. He knew it. I knew it. The way his jaw tightened right after he said it told me he knew exactly what he'd just done, which was repeat a line instead of saying something real. I'd like a few days to think it over, I said. I don't make financial decisions over a meal. Brenda's smile didn't move, but something behind it did. A small recalculation. Of course, she said. We understand completely. Loretta said something about vendor availability and time pressure, but Brenda touched her arm and she stopped. That was interesting too. Loretta didn't strike me as someone who stopped easily. When we said goodbye outside the restaurant, Nathan hugged me. He held on a second longer than usual. I didn't say anything about it. I just drove home and called Bart Holt. Bart had done investigative work on cases that came through my courtroom for close to 15 years. He was the kind of man who found things other people missed and didn't make a production out of it. When I explained what I needed, he asked 2 questions, quoted me a number, and said he'd be in touch. 4 days later, he called with the preliminary results. Brenda Navarro, born Brenda Christine Navarro, 33 years old, had been engaged twice before Nathan. The first engagement was to a man named Perry Dunbar in San Antonio, a logistics business owner in his late 40s. Perry had transferred $55,000 to various accounts for wedding vendor deposits. 6 weeks before the wedding date, the engagement ended. Perry had started asking to meet the vendors directly. When he tried to track them down himself, half the company names didn't exist in any business registry. Brenda told their mutual social circle that he had trust issues and had become controlling. The second engagement was to Dwight Schaefer, a commercial real estate broker in Austin. Dwight lost $67,000 through the same process. Deposits to vendors, delays on contracts, promises of paperwork that kept getting pushed back. When Dwight hired an attorney and began pulling on threads, the engagement dissolved. Brenda's version was that he'd been financially irresponsible and dishonest about his intentions. Both times, the accounts the money went to were connected through shared mailing addresses. Some of those addresses had Loretta Navarro's name on the registration records. This wasn't bad luck. This was a system. I sat with that for a while before Bart told me the rest. 3 months earlier, Nathan had taken out a loan against the house Carol left him. The house she'd spent 30 years paying for in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of Houston. He'd borrowed $80,000 against it. The funds had been transferred to an account Bart couldn't immediately connect to Nathan's name. I already knew whose name it would connect to. Nathan had been with Brenda for about 10 months. In that time, based on what I was looking at, she had positioned herself as the future of his life, separated him from the people who might ask inconvenient questions, and gotten access to the one significant asset he'd inherited from his mother. I thought about Carol. I thought about how she used to sit at the kitchen table going over the mortgage statements, making sure everything was on track, talking about how that house would always be there for Nathan if he needed it. I sat in my study for a long time that night without turning on the lights. The next morning, I called Lionel Pruitt. Lionel was a civil and family law attorney I'd known for years through professional circles. Careful, precise, no wasted motion. I laid out everything Bart had found and told him what I needed. How complete do you want this to be? Lionel asked. Complete enough that there's no version of events where they walk away clean, I said. He took the case that afternoon. Over the next week, Bart delivered the full report. More detail on the shell accounts, phone records showing regular contact between Brenda and Loretta during the periods when vendor payments were made, documentation of the previous engagements with corroborating records from Perry Dunbar and Dwight Schaefer, both of whom agreed to provide statements. The picture was clear. The only thing left was what to do with it. I called Nathan on a Thursday evening, 9 days after the lunch. I told him I'd thought it over. I told him I was willing to move forward, but that my financial advisor required a formal sit-down before I could release any funds. I said I needed Brenda and Loretta there too, that my advisor always met with everyone involved in a major gift transaction. I kept my voice easy and unhurried, the same way I used to speak from the bench when I wanted someone to feel like nothing unusual was happening. Nathan sounded relieved, genuinely relieved, in a way that told me he'd been carrying the weight of that ask for a while and was glad to have it moving. That's great, Dad. Really, I'll let Brenda know. Tuesday afternoon work for everyone? It worked. The meeting was set at a conference room in Lionel's building downtown. Real address, real elevator, real receptionist at the front desk. Lionel had arranged everything to look exactly like a routine financial consultation. He'd also set his phone to record the moment they walked through the door, which was legal under Texas law given that he was a party to the conversation. I arrived 30 minutes early. I laid Bart's full report on the table in front of my chair. I put the financial transfer records on top of it. Then I sat down and drank a cup of coffee and waited. Brenda came in confident. She was dressed carefully, the kind of outfit that says prepared without trying too hard. Loretta came in right behind her, smiling that practiced smile. Nathan walked in last and sat down next to me, on my side of the table, which I don't think he'd consciously planned, but which felt like something anyway. A man named Foster, one of Lionel's associates, played the role of financial advisor. He welcomed everyone, talked briefly about the process, and then turned it over to me to ask any preliminary questions I had before we moved to the paperwork stage. I thanked everyone for coming. Then I asked Brenda to walk me through the vendor list from the beginning. She did it smoothly: venue, florals, catering, photography. She had the names memorized and delivered them with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed it enough times that it felt natural. When she finished, I asked for the signed contracts. She said Patrice worked on relationships, not paperwork, at the early stages. Deposits came first to hold the dates, and formal contracts followed once everything was locked in. So you're asking me to release funds with no signed agreements in place, I said. That's how the luxury market operates, Clifford. It's built on trust between vendors and clients. I see. I opened the folder in front of me. Let's talk about Patrice Delgado, your coordinator. Of course. According to the Texas Secretary of State Business Registry, no company called by that name has a current registration in Harris County, and no wedding planner by that name holds an active license in this state. The room went quiet. Brenda's expression didn't collapse. I'll give her that. She adjusted the way someone does when they've had to adjust before. There must be some kind of filing error, she said. Patrice has been operating for years. She's extremely well regarded. There's no filing error, I said. I also want to talk about the accounts listed in your vendor budget. Several of them route to shell companies. When we traced the registration addresses on those companies, Loretta's name came up on more than one. Loretta's chair shifted back an inch. I don't know what you think you found, she said, but this is insulting. We came here in good faith. I'd like to talk about Perry Dunbar, I said, San Antonio. He lost $55,000 to a wedding that never happened. The vendors on his list didn't exist either. The engagement ended when he started asking to meet them directly. Brenda said nothing. Dwight Schaefer, Austin, $67,000. Same structure, same outcome. Both men have provided statements. Perry Dunbar's attorney has already been in contact with Lionel's office. I slid a page across the table toward Nathan. It was the loan document from the bank, the one tied to his mother's house. Next to it, I placed the transfer record showing where the $180,000 had gone. Nathan, I said, keeping my voice level. Did you know that money was going to an account you don't control? He stared at the page. His jaw was tight. Brenda's voice shifted. The professional warmth dropped and something harder came through. You don't know what you're talking about. Nathan loves me. Whatever you think this is, you're wrong. Then explain the accounts, I said. She looked at Nathan instead. Her voice softened again, pulling at something. Honey? Don't let him do this to us. He's never trusted your choices. This is him controlling you, the same way he always has. Nathan didn't look up from the page. I reached into the folder one more time and pulled out a printed transcript. Bart's team obtained a recorded phone call 2 months ago. I'm going to read you one section. I read it plainly, no drama. Brenda's voice from the recording. Nathan is easy. He does whatever I ask, as long as he thinks it's his own idea. He's just the front. Once the money clears, we move on. The room held completely still. Nathan looked up from the page, not at me, not at Brenda. He looked at the middle of the table, the way a person does when something they already half knew just became something they could no longer pretend they didn't know. Brenda moved fast. She reached across and put her hand on his arm. That's taken completely out of context, she said. Her voice had gone back to soft, urgent, the tone of someone trying to close a door before it swings all the way open. You know me. You know what we have. This is his version of things, not the truth. Nathan looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at me. His face did something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. It was the look of someone deciding whether they're going to say the true thing or the easy thing, and understanding for the first time that those are not the same choice. How long have you known? He asked me. About a week and a half, I said. I wanted to make sure I had everything right before I brought it to you. He nodded slowly, like the answer made sense. Like some part of him had already worked out that something like this was coming and had just been waiting for the shape of it to become clear. Brenda stood up. She was done with soft. Her voice came out sharp and flat. You want to talk about control? Look at what he's doing right now. He hired people to investigate me. He built a case against me like I'm a criminal, and you're just sitting there. You're a criminal, I said. I kept my voice the same way I would have in a courtroom. No heat in it, just the plain statement of a thing that was true. Wire fraud is a federal offense. You've done this twice before. The documentation on both prior cases is complete. You can't prove anything. I can prove all of it. I tapped the folder. Bank records, phone records, transfer records, business registration searches, and sworn statements from 2 previous victims. Lionel has already been in contact with the Assistant District Attorney's office. This file goes to them today regardless of what happens in this room. Loretta stood up too. Her composure had finally cracked around the edges. You're making a very serious mistake. I made my serious mistakes earlier, I said. I should have asked these questions 10 months ago. I'm not making them again. Brenda looked at Nathan one more time. It was a long look, the kind designed to remind someone of everything they'd felt. Every moment they'd believed in something. It was probably effective on most people. Nathan didn't move. Get out, he said. His voice was quiet, not angry, exactly. More like a door closing on something. Both of you. Right now, Loretta started to say something. He turned and looked at her and she stopped. They left. Brenda's heels were sharp on the floor in the hallway outside, fast and fading. Then the elevator, then nothing. The conference room was very quiet. Lionel gathered the documents without comment and stepped out to give us a moment. Foster followed him. Nathan sat with his elbows on the table and his face in his hands. He stayed like that for a while. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that the silence wasn't already saying better. After a few minutes, he straightened up. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. The house, he said, we're going to work on that. Lionel thinks there's a civil case for recovery. It won't be fast, and I won't promise you we get all of it back. But we're going to try, he nodded. How did she get me to do it, he said. It wasn't really a question. It was the thing he was going to be sitting with for a long time. I thought about how to answer that honestly without making it worse. She found something real in you, I said. Your mother had just been gone a few years. You wanted a family again. You wanted someone to build something with. Those aren't weaknesses. She just knew how to use them. He looked at the table. I knew something was wrong. He said, a few months in, I started to feel it. But every time I got close to saying something, she'd do something that made me feel like the problem was me. Like I was the one who didn't trust enough or love enough or commit enough. That's how it works, I said. That's the whole mechanism. I gave her mom's house. I know. He didn't say anything else for a while. I sat there with him. That was all I could do, and it felt like both too little and the only thing that mattered. When we finally got up to leave, he held the door for me the way he always had since he was tall enough to reach the handle. Some habits run deeper than whatever gets layered on top of them. We walked out into the afternoon and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. You hungry? I asked. He thought about it. Yeah, actually, yeah. There's a diner 2 blocks up. Best patty melt in Houston. Your mother used to say that. I remember, he said. We walked there together. The diner was the kind of place that hadn't changed in 30 years. Same red vinyl booths, same laminated menus, same coffee that came without you asking. Nathan and I slid into a booth by the window and ordered without much discussion. He got the patty melt. I got the same. We didn't talk about Brenda or Loretta or the conference room. We talked about other things, his job, a project he was managing out in Katy that was behind schedule because of a subcontractor issue, a book I'd been reading about the early history of the Texas court system. Normal things, the kind of conversation that doesn't mean much on its own but means everything when you've just come through something that shook the ground under both of you. At some point, he said, I pushed Arthur away and Dennis. Brenda said Arthur called too much, that Dennis was always negative. I thought she was just being honest about people I'd known for years. I know, I said, I'm going to have to call them. They'll pick up. I said, that's how you'll know they were real friends. He nodded and looked out the window for a moment. I keep thinking about how I just went along with it, he said. The portfolio sitting there at lunch, presenting her budget to you like it was my idea. I knew it wasn't right. Some part of me knew the whole time. You weren't stupid, I said. You were hopeful. Those aren't the same thing. She found that hope and she used it carefully. That's not a character flaw in you, it's a method she'd refined over years. He was quiet for a while after that. The food came, we ate. The coffee stayed warm because the waitress kept coming back with the pot, and neither of us told her to stop. Before we left, he asked me one more thing. When did you know for sure? Not suspect, no? When Bart confirmed the second prior engagement, I said, 2 is a pattern, 1 could be bad luck. 2 is a system, he thought about that. You didn't tell me right away, I needed the full picture first, and I needed to be sure you'd be able to hear it once I had it. He nodded like that was fair. Maybe it was. Maybe I should have moved faster. I've turned that over a few times since and I still don't have a clean answer. What I know is that I wasn't going to hand my son a half-built accusation against the woman he thought he loved and hope it landed right. I needed it to be complete, documented, and undeniable. And it was. The legal process moved the way it moves when the evidence is organized and the documentation is clean. Lionel filed the civil fraud complaint the day after the meeting. The recorded conversation, the transfer records, Bart's investigative report, and the sworn statements from Perry Dunbar and Dwight Schaefer gave the district attorney's office everything they needed to move quickly. Brenda Navarro pleaded guilty to wire fraud charges 6 weeks later. She received a 6-year federal sentence. Loretta, whose role in establishing the shell accounts and coordinating the financial routing went back through both prior schemes, received 8 years. The civil case for recovery of the $180,000 is still working through the courts. Lionel says we have a reasonable argument. I've stopped predicting outcomes in cases I care about personally. You learn that after enough years watching things go sideways for reasons nobody anticipated. What I can tell you is that Nathan's mother's house is still in the family. He's still living in it. Last month he called Arthur and Dennis and a few other people he drifted away from over the past year. They picked up the way I told him they would. He comes over for dinner most Sundays now. We don't talk about Brenda. There's nothing left to say about her that's worth the time. What we do talk about is everything else. His work, my reading, the Texans, whatever is going on in the news. The kind of steady, unremarkable conversation that used to fill Sunday afternoons when Carol was still alive and the 3 of us would sit around the table until the light changed and nobody wanted to be the first one to say it was time to go home. It's not the same, it never will be, but it's real and it's ours and nobody put it there for the wrong reasons. That's worth more than I can put a number on. If you're a father watching your son or daughter with someone who doesn't sit right with you, trust that feeling. You've earned it. The years you've put in, the things you've seen, the mistakes you've made and learned from, all of that is still working even when you think you're just a retired man sitting in a restaurant booth. And if you're someone who's been where Nathan was, who let someone in and got used for it, I want you to hear this clearly. It was not your fault for wanting something real. The people who run these schemes are counting on exactly that, your hope, your decency, your willingness to believe. Those are not weaknesses. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you they are. The con only works on people worth conning. Remember that.